We'll get started here in just a moment. I just wanted to give you a rundown of what you're going to see today, who you're going to see today. So we'll have in the middle Deputy Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan. To the right here will be Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Thomas Shannon. And to the right will be Deputy Secretary of Energy Dan Brouillette. They'll come out and make opening statements. They'll leave, and then we're going to have three other officials come out for Q&A, and that's Undersecretary of Defense for Policy John Rood, who will be in the middle. To the right here will be Acting Assistant Secretary of State Anita Preet, and to the right, Steve Earhart, who's the Acting Undersecretary of Energy for Nuclear Security and the Administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing? Good. Welcome to the 2018 Nuclear Posture Review Rollout, or as we refer to it here in the Pentagon, the NPR. To the American people, this administration's highest priority is your safety and security. 1 year ago, we began a focused and comprehensive look at what was needed to meet this fundamental responsibility. It started with President Trump's national security strategy, and in support, Secretary Mattis led the development of the National Defense Strategy. Both state the need for a safe, secure, effective nuclear deterrent. At the President's direction, the Department of State, Energy, and Defense worked together on a daily basis for this past year for the coordinated whole-of-government analysis of our nuclear deterrent. We leveraged centuries of combined expertise from across the government and the non-proliferation community for a strategy to keep America safe in this century with a deterrent that is modern and credible. This NPR is the result. Today I'm joined by Undersecretary of State Shannon and Deputy Secretary of Energy Brouillette. This reflects the team effort. To Undersecretary Shannon, every day we in the Department of Defense ask ourselves, how can we give our diplomats leverage so they always speak from a position of strength? The National Defense Strategy, directly supported by the 2018 NPR, is our answer. So now to the NPR itself. This review is consistent with U.S. nuclear policies since the end of the Cold War. It reaffirms that the fundamental role of U.S. nuclear policy is deterrence, and continues our clear commitment to non-proliferation and arms control. Since the end of the Cold War, the United States has worked to reduce the number and role of nuclear weapons. But the world looks different since the last NPR in 2010. The challenging and dynamic security environment requires steady action to strengthen deterrence. This NPR responds to today's security needs with a tailored nuclear deterrent strategy and flexible capabilities for effective deterrence. A one-size-fits-all approach has its limits. This NPR ensures we can deter any potential adversary because they are not all alike. We must keep America's deterrent credible by making it modern. The 2018 NPR calls for modernizing the nuclear triad and command and control system. which is necessary, affordable, and long overdue. Our nuclear triad has kept us safe for over 70 years. We cannot afford to let it become obsolete. The NPR also makes recommendations to keep our deterrent effective for our world today, namely lowering the yield of some existing submarine-launched ballistic missile warheads, and bringing back nuclear sea-based launched cruise missiles, a capability our nation had for decades. Neither recommendation requires developing new nuclear warheads. Neither will increase the size of our nuclear stockpile. They break no treaty. They align with our non-proliferation commitments. They strengthen American deterrence. Some will say any additional capability, no matter how measured, increases the chance of using one of these weapons. On the contrary, it is the exact opposite. The NPR states, and I quote, "The United States would only consider the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interests of the United States, its allies, and partners." The NPR clarifies long-standing policy that extreme circumstances could include significant non-nuclear strategic attacks. This clarification is stabilizing. It lowers the risk of nuclear use by anyone. The United States does not want to use nuclear weapons. We do want to maintain an effective deterrent to keep Americans and our allies and partners safe and secure. Undersecretary Shannon will speak to our NPR engagement with allies and partners. But before he does, I want to thank the men and women of our nuclear forces. Your dedication keeps America safe. We look forward to working with Congress as we implement these recommendations and for ongoing support for nuclear modernization. We also look forward to working with our allies, partners, to reduce the chances that these weapons will ever be used. Now, Undersecretary of State Shannon.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary Shanahan. I'm glad to be here today with you and Deputy Secretary Brouillette. As Deputy Secretary Shanahan noted, the Nuclear Posture Review is a whole-of-government effort. It is an important document that identifies the nuclear policies, strategy, and corresponding capabilities needed to protect us in an increasingly complex threat environment. Over the past decade, the United States has reduced the number and salience of our nuclear weapons by more than 85% since its Cold War peak. While Russia has joined us in strategic reductions, including ongoing implementation of the New START Treaty, Moscow retains a large stockpile of non-strategic nuclear weapons and continues to modernize those as well as its strategic systems. China is also modernizing and expanding its nuclear forces. Both countries are challenging the free and open international order. We know that other unfriendly regimes and enemies of our country put our lives at risk by pursuing nuclear weapons. North Korea continues its illicit nuclear weapons program and missile capabilities. Iran retains the technological capability to develop a nuclear weapon within 1 year of deciding to do so. The potential threat of non-state actors getting their hands on a nuclear weapon remains at the front of all of our minds. Nuclear terrorism is still a major threat in this century, and one we must work to mitigate at every opportunity. Because of the dangerous world we live in and our unwavering commitment to our allies, the 2018 Nuclear Posture Review focuses on strengthening extended deterrence. The United States has formal extended deterrence commitments that assure European, Asian, and Pacific allies of our commitment to use nuclear force to protect them if necessary. Ongoing, close collaboration with allies and partners is essential to deterring or defeating the common threats we face. This collaboration includes sustained dialogues and joint military exercises. But we also realize that every ally and partner faces a different threat environment. We will continue to work with them to tailor our assurance strategies in ways that are most effective for their specific situation. But let me be clear. The United States is committed to our allies under the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Our extended deterrence commitments are unwavering. We have the ability and will to fulfill them. Potential adversaries should not doubt our resolve. In addition, as the 2018 Nuclear Posture Review makes clear, the United States will hold accountable any state or non-state actor that supports terrorist efforts to obtain or employ a nuclear weapon. Important to this deterrence is maintaining our capabilities so that the United States can respond decisively across the full spectrum of potential nuclear and non-nuclear scenarios. But as this NPR makes clear, the United States will only consider the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interests of the United States, its allies, and partners. The NPR also states that, and I quote, "The United States will not use or threaten to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapons states that are party to the NPT and in compliance with their nuclear non-proliferation obligations." The United States is committed to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, an essential cornerstone of nuclear non-proliferation. Effective nuclear non-proliferation and weapons control measures like the NPT support U.S. allied and partner security. These measures control the spread of nuclear materials and technology, place limits on the production, stockpiling, and deployment of nuclear weapons, decrease misperception and miscalculation, and help avoid destabilizing nuclear weapons competition. Finally, this review also affirms that the United States will not resume nuclear explosive testing unless we find it necessary to ensure the stability and effectiveness of our nuclear arsenal. We call on all states possessing nuclear weapons to declare or to maintain a moratorium on nuclear testing. Going forward, we are also eager to increase transparency and predictability to avoid miscalculation among nuclear weapon states and other possessor states. That includes reestablishing the conditions necessary for greater trust with Russia and improved transparency with China as it expands and modernizes its nuclear forces. The 2018 NPR highlights the Trump administration's commitment to both the long-term goal of eliminating nuclear weapons and the requirement that the United States have modern, flexible, and resilient nuclear capabilities. Until nuclear weapons can be eliminated from the world, we must continue to ensure the security of our people and that of our allies and partners. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin by thanking Deputy Secretary Shanahan and Undersecretary Shannon, my colleagues from Defense and State, respectively. As the Secretaries just pointed out and just mentioned a few moments ago, this NPR is the culmination of nearly a year of briefings with Congress, consultations with our allies and partners, and collaboration with experts from all three of our departments. The 2018 NPR reflects the President's priority to put America first. Advancing our national interest by protecting our country and our allies and partners from those who would intend to do us harm. To that end, this year's NPR reflects a clear-eyed approach to modernizing our aged, Cold War nuclear arsenal as we confront the challenging geopolitical demands of the 21st century. As with previous NPRs, this review reflects both continuity and change. In its robust support for the Triad, and its reaffirming commitment to nonproliferation, counterproliferation, and counterterrorism, the review endorses our basic nuclear policies of the past quarter century. However, the review also supports change in the specific area of nuclear weapons reduction. Over the past decade, while the United States has led the world in these reductions, every one of our potential nuclear adversaries has been pursuing the exact opposite strategy. These powers are increasing the numbers and types of nuclear weapons in their arsenal, with some of them establishing doctrines of limited and coercive nuclear use. These moves, which are identified in the administration's recently released National Security and National Defense Strategies, represent a change in the contemporary security environment. The United States needs to respond by achieving a new and effective balance in our deterrent capabilities. As for my agency, the Department of Energy, it is clear that our national laboratories, plants, and production sites play a vital role in ensuring that the NPR priorities are met. In order to support the U.S. nuclear deterrent for the next several decades, DOE needs to maintain capabilities that are modern, flexible, and resilient. And consequently, this NPR recognizes that the national imperative of recapitalizing DOE's infrastructure. We will be updating aging facilities, some buildings that are nearly 50 years old, and recapitalizing facilities that are needed to produce the strategic materials so critical to maintaining our arsenal. We will also continue our successful execution of programs that are designed to extend warhead life, and we will continue to meet the nation's deterrent requirement through our department's unique and highly technical capabilities. These programs and capabilities are the basis of our nuclear triad and the bedrock of our nation's deterrent. Supporting the NPR's goals of preventing terrorism and reducing global nuclear dangers, the Department of Energy will continue to focus on nonproliferation, counterproliferation, and counterterrorism. Together with our allies and partners, we have enjoyed great success in these areas. Finally, it is important to note that none of our modernization efforts are possible without people. This review recognizes the need for a highly skilled nuclear security workforce and its vital work to maintain a credible deterrent into the future. Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, John Rood. Anita Freit, Acting Assistant Secretary of State. And Steve Earhart. From Acting Undersecretary of Energy for Nuclear Security and the Administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration. We'll start with Bob Burns from the Associated Press.
Thank you. Hello. Question regarding the low-yield submarine-launched ballistic missile that's mentioned as one of the supplements to the deterrent that's spelled out in the review. How much will it cost both the Defense Department and Energy Department to make that conversion of the warhead, and when will it be fielded, do you estimate?
Well, thank you for the question. Of course, in the nuclear posture review, we talk about the change in the security environment, which has led to some of the adjustments that we are making going forward. You'll see mostly in the nuclear posture review a lot of continuity with past policy with respect to the role of nuclear weapons, to provide deterrence overall, that is the primary objective of our nuclear force, as well as to assure allies to hedge against uncertainty and, if necessary, to provide a credible response option. One of the things in that security environment that is discussed in the report that we're concerned about is some of the adjustments in potential adversaries' thinking about nuclear weapons, with a greater reliance on nuclear weapons, a featuring of them in some cases, for example, in the Russian nuclear doctrine called escalating to de-escalate. And so with this greater reliance on nuclear weapons and a need to maintain a flexible approach so that our deterrent can be credible, we have, as mentioned in the report, said that we would pursue some supplementary capabilities, one of which is submarine-launched ballistic missile armed with a low-yield nuclear weapon. We're going to be coming forward. Of course, later this month, the President will submit his budget request to the Congress, including for the Defense Department. This will be one of the things that will be contained in that part. One of your questions was the funding for that. Obviously, that'll have to await the release of the President's budget later this month.
Can you give me a ballpark number?
Yeah, it's a modest amount because what we're talking about is we have an existing submarine force armed with existing submarine-launched ballistic missiles. This is a supplementary capability that would make some modifications to our existing force. It does not involve production of new nuclear warheads. It does not involve production of new ballistic missiles or submarines, except for as part of our Columbia-class modernization, of course, that predates this NPR.
What about the timeline of when you expect it would be fielded?
That's something that remains to be determined, but certainly in the near term, this is one of the near-term enhancements that we would like to pursue.
Like this year, next year?
I think I'll leave it as in the near term, we're planning to pursue this.
Sylvie Lantang from Agence France Presse.
Hello. The NPR mentions nuclear threats from Russia against the allies. Can you give us some examples of those threats?
Sure.
Precisely.
I'll start, and perhaps others would like to add. Certainly, we've seen in the recent past some statements from Russian officials in the public domain talking about threats to use nuclear weapons. There is a published doctrine that the Russian government has put forward. In addition to some of these statements, of course, we've also seen exercises involving some of these capabilities. And so the combination of statements, exercises, and capability changes, in addition to doctrinal changes, combine to cause some concern for the United States and our allies. Anita Fried is here from the State Department. I don't know if you'd like to add.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks very much. No, I mean, as John has pointed out, there are definitely some increased threats. Russia has increased its reliance on nuclear weapons and its capabilities, and it's, as we've pointed out, it's building a large and diverse nuclear arsenal. That said, we do not want to consider Russia an adversary. As Undersecretary Shannon and others have mentioned, we continue to successfully implement the New START Treaty. Look forward to meeting the central treaty limits on Monday, as a matter of fact, on February 5th. And we seek stable relations, but we also have an issue with Russia in terms of treaty compliance. Russia has violated treaties and agreements. We seek to discuss that, and we have an ongoing conversation about it. But we certainly look forward to, we do not want to regard Russia as an adversary.
Do they threat a specific country?
There have been some statements that we found concerning, as you recall, by Russian officials in the past towards specific areas of NATO and the like.
Michael Gordon from the Wall Street Journal.
A question for the DoD and DOE rep. The report is very explicit that you would contemplate the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances, which could include significant non-nuclear strategic attacks. This is stated in the section of reports made very explicit, and also that you would contemplate the use of weapons if there was a terrorist nuclear attack against those that enabled it. The way this is being read is that the U.S. is prepared to use nuclear weapons if there's a cyber attack that would affect the population or do great damage to the infrastructure of our allies or of the United States. Is that the message you intended to send? Because that's how everyone's interpreting it. And could you please also give us the projected total dollar amount of this modernization for DoD and DOE? There are a lot of figures in here, but the dollar amount of this modernization is included.
With respect to U.S. nuclear declaratory policy, in that sense, the declaratory policy of the United States as articulated in this nuclear posture review is constant with that of the past. Again, it is that the United States would employ nuclear weapons only in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interests of the United States, allies, and partners. Now, the part of the declaratory policy that you are referring to is the circumstances under which the United States would contemplate the use of nuclear weapons, or what constituted extreme circumstances. And I think in that area, the context of an attack that it does not involve nuclear weapons initially would be very important to take into account. It's been longstanding U.S. policy to maintain some ambiguity around the circumstances under which we would consider the use of nuclear weapons in response to a strategic non-nuclear attack on the United States. And this NPR is explicit in saying it is in our interest, it is part of reinforcing deterrence to maintain some ambiguity in those circumstances.